Alright, man, peace. So now this is going to be my review of the film Uncle Drew. I saw this film in the theater well over a month ago, but I'm just getting around to doing some of my movie reviews right now. All in all, I thought that Uncle Drew was a very entertaining film. I wouldn't quite call it a kid's film because some of the jokes were kind of off color. Some of the topic matter in the film was a little bit above what children should be viewing. So for people who think that this is a children's movie, it's not. I would say that it is certainly PG-13 at the very lowest. But overall, I thought that it was very entertaining. I thought that for Kyrie Irving's first turn in a major cinematic project, he did a very good job. Very good job. Overall theme of the film, I thought was very relevant, very pertinent to a lot of the motifs that I touch on my channel. Number one being idolatry. And idolatry tends to stem from insecurities. And that's what the lead character of this film, played by Lil Rel, who's someone that I'm watching because I'm starting to see him pop up everywhere. And when I start to see you pop up too many places at once, that tells me that you're doing a lot of things behind the scenes that they want you to do in regards to pledges and rituals, so on and so forth. So Lil Rel is certainly somebody to watch. But once again, just getting back to the overall plot of the movie, Kyrie Irving plays a street ball legend by the name of Uncle Drew, of course, who's been dominating the asphalt and all the street ball tournaments since the late 60s, he and his crew. Of course, comprised of Shaquille O'Neal and Chris Webber. I believe Chris Webber's character's name is Preacher. He's supposed to be married to Lisa Leslie's character. Shaquille O'Neal's character's name is Big Fella. Reggie Miller's character's name was Lights. Even though he was blind as hell, he still was the best shooter on the team, of course. A lot of this was meant to be very thinly veiled allusions to what many of these basketball stars were known for when they played in the NBA. And there were certain subplots in the film that may have been very revelatory, but just getting back to the point, the lead character of Dax, played by Lil Rel, is a very insecure person. He grew up basically in an orphanage, and he idolized Michael Jordan. He wanted to be Michael Jordan. He wanted to be a basketball star until his dreams were smashed right into his face when another one of the characters, played by a Caucasian man who in the film is known as Mookie. Mookie is the resident wigger white boy. He blocked Dak's shot when they were both children in one of these little church league tournaments. So Dax is all grown up now. He's still very, very insecure. He's still trying to live out his basketball dream. And his life does not quite feel complete because of the television programming that he received as a child that he was forced to endure throughout his formative years. And of course, that resonates in real life. We see that all over the place with many young little black boys, young black men, so-called black men, who live through the television set and idolize rappers or singers or athletes. And unfortunately, that oftentimes is a sign of insecurity in this society. Many young boys are forced to fit into certain cliques based on athletic aspirations. And there are a lot of things that brothers can aspire to be other than an athlete. Well, this person, Dax, he has a girlfriend played by Tiffany Haddish, the popular hood rat in Hollywood. She's all over the place. And their dynamic also resonates with a lot of things that I talk about on this channel. Because it's very clear that not only is she a hood rat, she's also just a concubine. She's an opportunist. And she's using this person, Dax, played by Lil Rel, until she can find someone better. He also represents someone with very low self-esteem that she could be with to feel better about herself because most likely she can't find anybody better. Well, over the course of the film, we find out that Dax is the captain of one of the church league teams, but he loses the captaincy of the team. He's no longer allowed to coach the team because he's inept. He promised certain amenities to many of his players. The best player on the team is someone named Casper Jones, played by Aaron Gordon of the Orlando Magic. It's a very comical scene where we see that Dax, who works at a sneaker store, he promises Aaron Gordon free Jordans. I believe they were Jordan 11s. I'm trying to remember. If they wasn't Jordan 11s, one of you brothers can correct me on that. Either way, their relationship falls apart, and now Dax has to come up with a brand new roster to participate in the Rucker tournament, because this is his way of trying to live out his round ball fantasy. And he comes across Kyrie Irving's character of Uncle Drew sitting in the park, and of course, in a very predictable scene, Kyrie Irving challenges one of the participants that are on the asphalt playing one-on-one. He challenges him to one-on-one, and of course, Kyrie teaches him a lesson, or I should say Uncle Drew teaches him a lesson. This inspires Dax to ask Uncle Drew if he'll be the captain on his team in the Rucker Classic, right, or in the Rucker tournament. Uncle Drew reticently accepts on one condition: that he can call the shots and he can bring back all the old members of his Rucker tournament team from the 60s. So that's where the film goes from there. It's basically a trek of Uncle Drew and Dax building up their rapport while trying to reassemble Kyrie Irving / Uncle Drew's old team. And on the way, we learn a lot about Dax. We learn a lot about Uncle Drew. We learn a lot about why their team fell apart in the first place. And I think that this subplot may have been revelatory. It may have been an allusion to what went on between Kyrie Irving and LeBron James. It may have been an allusion to what may have occurred between Shaq and Kobe. Who the hell knows? Either way, Shaq's character of Big Fella is extremely upset still after all these years with Uncle Drew. Why is that? Because Uncle Drew slept with Shaq's wife, or the Big Fella's wife, before the big game in the Rucker tournament. And that fractured the entire team. They had not been the same for many years after that. And it took a major process of contrition from Uncle Drew for them to be able to come back together. So this was truly a film that was about growing and accepting your shortcomings. There was a great scene where they were driving in Uncle Drew's van. Basically, the whole team was in the van. And they got to the gas station, and there was a girls' basketball team there. Well, Dax realized that he did not have any gas money, but he didn't want to look like a loser. So what he did was he challenged the girls' basketball team to a game against his squad of old men. And of course, very predictably, the group of old men lost. Why is that? Not only to move the plot forward, but also to subconsciously and subliminally empower women's basketball. See, we could beat men. But what also was revealed in that moment was when Uncle Drew came to understand that Dax is a person who's so insecure that he doesn't trust anybody. And a lot of times in life, when people are raised in very fractured environments, they learn to not trust anyone, and they learn to live according to appearances. And that's what Dax was trying to do. He was very, very scared to admit that he needed help. He needed gas money. This is also a generational tale too, because we see the difference between the mindset of Dax and the mindset of Uncle Drew and his crew, who are much more brotherly. They're much more genteel in how they treat one another. Their rapport is much more natural. I'm not sure if that was purposeful by the director, but we see that there is a major difference between the rapport, or at least how they relate to one another, the older generation, as opposed to this generation. Oh, and before I forget, there was also a very good scene where, right in the aftermath of the character of Dax, played by Little Rel, getting embarrassed by the wiggle white boy Mookie, Dax tries to go back to his apartment that he shares with his hood rat girlfriend, Tiffany Haddish. And of course, she shits on him. Kicks him out the house, gives him a garbage bag to take all this stuff in. And that's why I tell you, brother, what I tell you, brothers, know who you're living with. Know who you're living with. Because the hood rat / concubine will try to emasculate, because they have no respect for the masculine principle. Now, because he was never raised, the character of Dax was not raised in a strong household, he never knew that. But we get to see the difference between a hood rat / concubine and a real wife in the character of Maya, who we see right here with her hand on Dax's shoulder, her left hand on Dax's shoulder. We see the difference, the disparity between the concubine and the wife, because she's much more supportive, she's softer, more feminine. That's why I tell you, brothers, there's good women out there. You just have to take your time. You have to take your time, and you have to have something to offer them as well. But you do have to take your time, and this movie shows that. Of course, the film builds up in a very predictable way. to the final tournament game between Dax's team. I believe they called the Harlem Buckets by this time. And Mookie's team, the Wicked White Boys team. But the character that Shaq plays, the big fella, I believe he had a heart ailment. So he's unable to play in the last game. So once again, we get the gender bending agenda. Lisa Leslie gets to join the men's team for the last game, the final game. And of course, they win. And in predictable fashion, Uncle Drew gives up the last shot to Dax to finally build his confidence, to redeem the shortcoming that he experienced as a child, to bring everything full circle. And then, of course, at the very, very end of the scene, we get to see Shaquille O'Neal expose his buttocks as usual. In another Luciferian agenda that they perpetuate, where they like to show people's backsides. I've seen that many times in many movies. Oftentimes you'll see that, especially with black male characters, they'll either show their ass, they'll get shot in the ass by a bullet, or they'll be forced to engage in some type of anal rape scene, a la Ving Rhames in Pulp Fiction. For those of you guys who might remember, Denzel Washington in the film Training Day, there was a scene where he had to get shot in his ass. Remember that? He said, "Oh, you son of a bitch. You shot me in the ass." That was a ritual that they played out on screen. Okay? I mean, not to digress, but proverbially speaking, he played Asar. And Ethan Hawke played Haru. That's what that film was about. It was about his training. He was the apprentice. Denzel was the master. But that was the reason why they had that scene where Denzel got shot in his backside. That was ritualistic. Remember, Martin Lawrence also got shot in his ass in Bad Boys 2. Remember that? And of course, Ving Rhames getting anal raped in Pulp Fiction. Will Smith in 6 Degrees of Separation. So on and so forth. That's meant as a ritual. When you see a so-called black actor do that in film, he's either going to get some type of high award, or that's a sign that he's going to be raised to great prominence. He's always going to have a space in Hollywood. Ving Rhames will always be allowed to work in Hollywood because of that. And Shaquille O'Neal is just another asset. He's just another monarch athlete in the industry. But overall, on a rating of 1 to 5, I will give this film probably 3.5 out of 5. 3 out of 5 or 3.5 out of 5. Very entertaining film, and if you pay attention, it has pretty good themes. So peace.